She found the note tucked inside her grandmother's old Kwanzaa kinara, and what it revealed would shatter everything she thought she knew about her family's most sacred tradition. December 26th arrived with that particular Chicago cold that bites through layers, turning breath into clouds and sidewalks into ice mirrors. Maya Torres stood in her grandmother's Bronzeville apartment, surrounded by the scent of sweet potato pie and collard greens still lingering from yesterday's Christmas feast. The radiator clanked its familiar rhythm. Outside, neighbor kids laughed, testing new sleds on the hill by the park. She was here for Kwanzaa preparation, the annual ritual Grandma Letty had orchestrated for 43 years without fail. But this year, Letty's hands shook too much to arrange the ceremonial items. Arthritis, the doctor said. Time, Letty whispered, as if it were something she could negotiate with. Maya lifted the wooden kinara from its storage box, its 7 candle holders worn smooth by decades of handling. Something rattled inside the base. She turned it over and a folded piece of yellowed paper slipped out, landing softly on the worn Persian rug her grandmother had owned since the 70s. The handwriting was Letty's, but younger, steadier loops and confident crosses on the T's. Dated December 26, 1981. Maya's mother would have been 8 then, the same age Maya's daughter Zara was now. "I made a choice tonight that will haunt me," it began. Maya's pulse quickened. She glanced toward the kitchen where Letty hummed softly, sorting through dried corn for the muhindi. The steam from boiling water created shadows on the wallpaper, the same floral pattern that had witnessed 4 decades of family gatherings, arguments, reconciliations, and secrets. She kept reading. The note described a Kwanzaa celebration in 1981, held in this very apartment when the neighborhood looked different, before the shuttered factories reopened as lofts, before the coffee shops replaced corner stores where old men played dominoes, back when Letty and Marcus were still figuring out how to afford both rent and dignity in a city that often demanded you choose. That year, Letty's sister Diane had shown up uninvited. Maya had heard Diane's name exactly twice in her 29 years. Once when she was 7, overhearing whispered phone conversations that ended with her mother crying. Once at 15, when she'd asked directly and Grandma Letty's face had turned to stone, lips pressed so tight they disappeared. "Some people make choices that take them away from family," was all she'd said. But the note told a different story. Diane had arrived that December night carrying a suitcase and her 3-year-old daughter, both of them bruised in ways that made Letty's stomach turn. Diane's husband, a man whose charm masked violence, whose apologies came with flowers and fresh injuries, had finally gone too far. She needed shelter. She needed her sister. The apartment had been full that night. Marcus, their 2 daughters, Letty's mother visiting from Alabama, and Marcus's brother with his family. 13 people crammed into 3 rooms for the first night of Kwanzaa. The black, red, and green flag hung above the mantel. The unity cup waited to be shared. Diane stood in the doorway, her daughter clutching her leg, silent in the way children get when they've learned that making noise brings danger. Marcus took Letty aside, his voice low, practical, edged with fear they both understood but rarely named. They'd just scraped together first and last month rent after he'd been laid off from the steel mill. His new job at the warehouse paid less, started in a week. They had $4 in the bank. The landlord was already annoyed about the noise from their girls playing. "We can't," Marcus said. Not because he didn't care, because the math of survival doesn't accommodate saints. Letty looked at her sister, at the way Diane held herself small, apologetic for existing, for needing, for being in danger. Then she looked at the kinara sitting on the table, the black candle in the center waiting to be lit for Unjoma, unity, the principle that was supposed to mean something beyond ritual, beyond symbolism. She made the choice that would echo through decades. "You can stay tonight," Letty told Diane, "but tomorrow you need to go to the shelter on 47th Street. We'll give you bus fare. We can't." Maya's hands trembled holding the note. The apartment felt smaller, the walls closer. She could hear Grandma Letty in the kitchen, still humming, an old gospel tune their family always sang, the one about being a shelter in the storm. The note continued in handwriting that grew shakier, as if her hand had betrayed her even then. Diane had nodded, hadn't argued, had simply asked if she could have some food, maybe play with the other children for a bit, pretend things were normal for an evening. Letty had said yes to that much. They'd lit the black candle for unity. They'd spoken the words about family and community, about standing together, about the strength found in collective purpose. Marcus had led the discussion, his voice rich with conviction about principles that seemed in that moment like beautiful lies. Diane had listened quietly from the corner, her daughter finally asleep in her arms. The next morning, before anyone else woke, Diane was gone. She'd left a note of her own, thanking Letty, saying she understood, apologizing for the burden. She'd taken the bus fare Letty left on the table and disappeared into the gray Chicago dawn. Letty never heard from her again. Maya's throat tightened. She thought about all the Kwanzaa celebrations she'd attended in this apartment, the careful arrangement of the mat, the crops, the unity cup. The way Grandma Letty always paused before lighting that first black candle, her eyes distant for just a moment before she'd smile and begin the ceremony. She was teaching them, or perhaps atoning, or maybe both. "Maya, baby, you finding everything okay?" Grandma Letty's voice drifted from the kitchen, thin with age but warm with love. Maya folded the note quickly, her mind racing. The radiator clanked again. Outside, someone's car alarm went off, then fell silent. Life continuing its ordinary rhythm, while everything she understood about her family's foundation shifted beneath her feet. She thought about her own life, how she'd moved to the north side 3 years ago, into a renovated condo she could barely afford, climbing the ladder at the marketing firm. How she'd stopped hosting family dinners because her place was too small, too new, too carefully curated for the chaos of relatives and their needs. How she'd written checks to charities and called it compassion, kept her circle small and called it boundaries. How her cousin Jasmine, struggling through a divorce, working 2 jobs, drowning, had asked to stay with her last month, and Maya had said her lease didn't allow long-term guests. A lie that tasted like preservation, like survival math, like her grandmother's choice. The parallel hit like Chicago wind off the lake, sharp and unavoidable. But there was more to the note. Letty had written that she'd tried to find Diane, made calls, asked around the neighborhood, visited the shelter on 47th Street repeatedly. Nothing. She'd carried the guilt through that year, through Marcus's death in 1995, through raising her 2 daughters and grandchildren, through every Kwanzaa ceremony that followed. The black candle became her confession, lit annually as both remembrance and regret. Then, in small, cramped writing at the bottom, a revelation. "I learned last week that Diane died in 1997. I found her daughter, my niece, your cousin, in Detroit. Her name is Angela. She's raising 3 children alone, working at a hospital, barely making it. She doesn't know we exist. Marcus's pride and my cowardice built a wall 40 years tall. I'm writing this because I'm running out of time to decide if that wall should stand." Maya's breath caught. The date on the note was December 26, 1981, but that couldn't be right. She looked again, closer. The paper was old, yes, but the ink at the bottom was newer. The date was from 1981, but Letty had kept this note, had kept adding to it over the years. The last entry was dated just 2 months ago. Her grandmother had been carrying this story like a stone in her chest for 43 years, adding to it, revisiting it, unable to either bury it or speak it aloud. Maya heard footsteps. Grandma Letty emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel embroidered with sunflowers. She stopped when she saw Maya holding the note, saw her granddaughter's face, the understanding, the questions, the judgment and compassion warring in her eyes. "You found it," Letty said simply, not surprised, almost relieved. The afternoon light slanted through the window, catching dust motes that swirled between them like suspended time. The apartment held its breath. "I've been waiting for someone to find it," Letty continued, lowering herself into her worn armchair, the one that molded perfectly to her frame after decades of use. Couldn't say it out loud, couldn't throw it away, couldn't fix it, just kept waiting. Maya's mind spun with questions, but one emerged first. "Does Mom know?" Letty shook her head. "Your mother was too young to remember Diane clearly, and after I let her forget, let everyone forget. Easier that way." "Angela," she said. "She's real? She's in Detroit?" "Last I knew," Letty said. Her eyes grew distant, looking at something beyond the walls, beyond the years. "I have an address, phone number. Never used it. Too ashamed. Too afraid she'd hate me for what I did to her mother. What I didn't do." The radiator clanked again, like punctuation. Maya thought about umoja, unity, about the gap between principle and practice, between the stories we tell and the lives we live. She thought about her cousin Jasmine, about the lies she'd told, about the checks she'd written to strangers while family struggled just outside her carefully maintained borders. "What was she like?" Maya asked. "Diane." Letty's face softened, tears gathering in the creases around her eyes. "Funny, so funny. Used to make up songs about everything. Grocery shopping, doing dishes, waiting for the bus. Made Marcus laugh till he cried. Made me feel lighter. We were close once, before—" She trailed off, and Maya understood. Before life got complicated, before survival demanded choices that carved away pieces of who you wanted to be. "I was so scared," Letty whispered. "We were so close to losing everything ourselves. I told myself we couldn't save her without drowning, that putting on our own oxygen mask first wasn't selfish, it was smart, that I had to protect my own children before I could help hers." "Were you wrong?" Maya asked, the question genuine, not accusatory. Letty looked at her granddaughter with eyes that had seen decades of consequences unfold from single moments. "I don't know. Maybe we would have lost the apartment. Maybe Marcus wouldn't have kept his new job with the chaos. Maybe my girls would have suffered. Maybe we all would have survived together and been stronger for it. You can't live in the maybe of 40 years ago. You can only live in the definitely of now." The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, the December light was already fading, Chicago winter swallowing the afternoon. Soon it would be time to light the first candle, to begin the ceremony, to speak the words they'd spoken every year. Maya looked at the note in her hands, then at her grandmother, then at the Canara sitting ready on the table, empty holders waiting for candles that would burn through 7 nights of principles and promises. "What do you want to do?" Maya asked quietly. Letty's hands shook in her lap, not just from arthritis now, but from something deeper. "I want to be brave enough at 87 to do what I was too scared to do at 44. The words hung in the air like a prayer. Maya pulled out her phone. The screen glowed in the dimming light. Her fingers hovered over the search bar, then moved with sudden certainty. Detroit area codes, hospital employee directories, social media platforms where lives left digital footprints. "Help me find her," Maya said. Letty's breath hitched. "It's been 43 years. She might not want—" "Then that's her choice to make. But Grandma, carrying this alone, that's not unity. That's not umoja. That's just silence pretending to be peace." 20 minutes of searching, cross-referencing names and ages, hospital systems and neighborhood clues from the address Letty provided. The internet making possible what shame had kept hidden. And there she was, Angela Patterson, 45 years old, registered nurse at Detroit Medical Center.
Her profile showed a woman with Diane's eyes, Letty's smile, a tiredness etched around her mouth that spoke of years spent holding things together through sheer will. Her cover photo showed 3 teenagers, all lanky limbs and bright faces, standing in front of a small house with peeling paint, but flowers blooming defiantly in the yard. Family we never knew, roots that spread beyond the boundaries we drew. Maya's hand shook as she showed Grandma Letty the screen. The old woman stared at her niece's face, the ghost of her sister in those features, the passage of time made visible in a stranger who should have been family. Tears spilled down Letty's cheeks, tracking through makeup and history, washing away nothing but at least acknowledging everything. "She looks strong," Letty whispered. "Diane would be proud." "Call her," Maya said, pulling up the phone number listed on the hospital directory. "Now?" Letty's voice cracked with panic and hope tangled together. "Before courage runs out, before another year of Kwanzaa passes with that black candle lying to all of us." Grandma Letty took the phone with hands that shook so badly Maya had to steady them. She dialed, the numbers appearing on the screen like a bridge being built digit by digit across 40 decades of silence. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Maya watched her grandmother's face, fear and longing, regret and hope, the past and present colliding in the space between rings. "Hello?" A woman's voice, cautious, professional, the tone of someone used to calls that bring problems. Letty opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came. Maya gently took the phone, put it on speaker, her hand covering her grandmother's trembling fingers. "Hi, is this Angela Patterson?" "Yes, who's this?" Maya looked at Grandma Letty, gave her a small nod of encouragement. Letty closed her eyes, gathered something from deep inside, and spoke. "Angela, my name is Letty. I was your mother's sister. I'm your aunt, and I owe you 43 years of truth." Silence on the other end, not the empty silence of disconnection, but the full silence of shock, of years of questions suddenly finding an unexpected door. "My mother?" Angela's voice shifted, became younger, vulnerable. She never talked about family. I thought I didn't have any."
Letty said, tears making her voice thick but clear.
"You do. You always did, and I'm so sorry you had to think otherwise. I'm so sorry for so many things." The conversation that followed was halting, careful, full of gaps and questions that couldn't be answered in one call. Angela needed time to process, to be angry, to decide what this meant. Letty needed to explain, to apologize, to offer connection without demanding forgiveness. But the bridge was being built. When they finally hung up, with promises to talk again soon, with Angela saying she needed to think, but also saying she'd always wondered, had always felt an absence she couldn't name, the apartment seemed different, lighter, maybe, or perhaps just more honest. Grandma Letty sat back in her chair, exhausted and unburdened in equal measure. "I don't know if she'll forgive me." "That's her journey," Maya said. "But Grandma, you did the brave thing. Finally." Letty looked at the quinata, at the empty holders waiting for their candles. "All these years, teaching about unity while keeping us divided, teaching about principles while avoiding the cost of practicing them." Maya thought about her own ledger, her cousin Jasmine, the walls she'd built, the convenient lies she'd called boundaries, the way she'd made her life smaller to keep it safer, turned her heart into something efficient rather than expansive. She picked up her phone again, scrolled to Jasmine's number, took a breath. "Hey," she texted, "that offer to stay with me, it's still open. My lease was never the problem. My fear was. Come whenever you need. Stay as long as it takes. Family means something, and I'm sorry I forgot that." "You serious?" The reply came quickly. "Dead serious. Bring the kids. We'll figure it out." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Thank you. God, Maya, thank you. I'll be there this weekend." Maya looked up to find Grandma Letty watching her with knowing eyes. "The ripples spread, don't they?" the old woman said softly. "Yeah," I agreed. "They do." That evening, as twilight turned the windows blue and the temperature dropped toward single digits, Maya's mother arrived with Zara. They filled the small apartment with noise and warmth, unpacking the mkeka mat, arranging the corn and crops, preparing for the ceremony. When it came time to light the black candle for Umoja, Grandma Letty called everyone to gather close. The Kinada sat on the coffee table, surrounded by family, held by tradition. "Before we start," Letty said, her voice stronger than it had been in months, "I need to tell you all a story." And she did, all of it. The choices made in 1981, the silence that followed, the note that waited to be found, the phone call made that afternoon, the cousin they'd never known about, living 3 hours away, carrying their blood and history without anyone to share it with. Maya's mother cried. Zara listened with wide eyes, not fully understanding but sensing the weight of what was being said. The room absorbed the confession, let it settle like snow on old ground. "I've been lighting this candle every year and saying the words about unity while knowing I'd broken it, while knowing I'd let fear be louder than principle. I couldn't undo the past, but maybe we can build something different going forward." She picked up the black candle, her hand still shaking but her grip firm. "Umoja means unity. But real unity isn't just the easy connections. It's the hard ones, the ones that cost us something, the ones that require us to be brave when being careful seems smarter." She lit the candle. The flame caught, grew steady, and cast dancing shadows on the walls that had witnessed so much. "This year," Letty said, "we're going to make this mean something. We're going to invite Angela and her family to visit. We're going to bridge what I broke, and we're going to remember that the hardest principle to practice is the one we claim to value most." They passed the unity cup, each person sipping and speaking their gratitude, their hopes, their commitments. When it came to Maya, she thought about the walls she'd built, the ones she was choosing to dismantle. "I'm grateful," she said, "for the courage it takes to admit you were wrong and for the chance to do better than fear allows." Zara watched everything with the absorption of children who sense importance even when they can't name it. She would remember this night, not the details perhaps, but the feeling, the sense that family was something you actively built, not just something that existed, that principles required practice, not just proclamation. Later, after the ceremony ended and the family ate together, sweet potato pie and collard greens, cornbread and stories, Maya helped Grandma Letty wash dishes. The kitchen window looked out on the alley, where streetlights flickered on one by one, small fires against the winter dark. "You think Angela will come?" Maya asked, scrubbing a serving dish worn smooth by decades of use. "I don't know," Letty said honestly. "But I hope, and hope is more than I've let myself have for 43 years. She dried a plate slowly, carefully. "You know what scared me most finding that note? That you'd judge me, that you'd see me as someone who failed at the one thing I pretended to value." Maya set down the dish, turned to look at her grandmother. "I see someone who was human, who was scared, who made a choice she regretted and carried it alone for decades. That's not failure, Grandma. That's just life, complicated, messy life. And now? Now you're trying to make it right. That's more than most people do. Most people just bury their regrets and pretend they never existed." Letty nodded, staring out at the darkening alley. "When I'm gone," she said quietly, "I want you to remember this. Teach Zara, teach whoever comes next. The principles we claim to live by, they don't mean anything until they cost us something, until they make us uncomfortable, until we have to choose them over our fear." "I will," Maya promised. They finished the dishes in companionable silence. the radiator clanking its evening rhythm, the sounds of family drifting from the living room where Maya's mother and Zara looked through old photo albums trying to find pictures of Diane, of the aunt who'd been erased, now being remembered. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon when January cold had settled into Chicago's bones, a car pulled up outside Grandma Letty's building. Maya watched from the window as a woman climbed out, Angela, older than her profile pictures, wearing a coat too thin for Chicago winter. Behind her, 3 teenagers emerged, looking uncertain but curious. They stood on the sidewalk looking up at the building. Angela's breath made clouds in the frozen air. She was gathering courage, Maya realized, making the same choice Grandma Letty had made on the phone, to be brave when being absent seemed safer. Maya grabbed her coat, ran downstairs before they changed their minds. The cold hit her face like a slap, stealing her breath. "Angela?" Maya called. The woman turned and Maya saw it, the family resemblance, the features that echoed across generations, the evidence that blood doesn't stop flowing just because people stop speaking. "Maya?" Angela's voice shook. I almost turned around 3 times. They stood in the cold, strangers who should have been family, bridging the gap one awkward moment at a time. Then Angela stepped forward, and Maya did too, and they hugged, the embrace tentative at first, then firmer, 2 branches of the same tree finally touching. "Grandma Letty's upstairs," Maya said. "She's been watching that window for an hour, pretending not to, but definitely watching." Angela laughed, a sound caught between nervousness and relief. Should I be angry? I've spent weeks trying to decide how to feel." "Feel however you feel," Maya said, "but maybe give her a chance to explain, to apologize, to try." "That's why I came," Angela admitted, "because trying matters, because silence is easier than connection, but easier doesn't mean better." They went upstairs together, Maya, Angela, and the 3 teenagers who'd just discovered they had family in Chicago, that their roots spread wider than they'd known. The hallway smelled like cooking from various apartments, life layered on life in the way cities hold stories. At Grandma Letty's door, Angela hesitated. Her hand hovered over the wood. Behind it, everything would change, either toward healing or toward a different kind of closure, but change regardless. She knocked. The door opened almost immediately. Grandma Letty stood there, smaller than Maya remembered, aged by anticipation and hope. She looked at Angela, and decades collapsed between them, 1981 meeting now, choices meeting consequences, fear meeting courage. "Angela," Letty breathed, "you look so much like her, like Diane." Angela's composure cracked. Tears spilled over, 45 years of wondering and absence finally given a name, a face, a connection. "I don't remember her very well, just pieces. She used to sing all the time, made up songs about everything." Letty's laugh was half a sob. Yes, she did. She absolutely did. They stood in the doorway, not quite embracing, not quite separate. Then Letty stepped back, invited them in, and the small apartment that had held so much silence suddenly filled with voices, questions and answers, stories and tears, the awkward navigation of family rebuilding itself from fragments. Maya watched from the side as her grandmother and Angela sat on the couch, looking through the photo albums, finding pictures of Diane. Angela's children sprawled on the floor, playing with Zara, forming bonds that were both brand new and ancient, the way family always does when given the chance. Her mother made tea, moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, absorbing this new reality of cousins she'd never known existed, rearranging her understanding of her family tree. The Kanara still sat on the coffee table, candles half burned from the week of Kwanzaa now past, but its purpose felt more complete than any year before, not because the ritual was performed perfectly, but because the principles had finally cost something, demanded something, meant something beyond words. As evening settled in and the conversation flowed easier, finding rhythm and common ground, Maya stepped into the kitchen. Through the doorway, she could see everyone gathered, 4 generations visible in the room, each carrying pieces of the same story, each adding their own chapters. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jasmine. "Moved in today. Your guest room is perfect. My kids are already making a mess. Thank you doesn't cover it. You saved us." Maya smiled, typed back, "Family, that's what we do. Or at least what we're learning to do." She looked out the kitchen window at the Chicago night, lights stretching toward the lake, each window holding its own stories of connection and separation, of people choosing each day whether to build bridges or walls. The choice wasn't always easy. Sometimes being careful seemed wiser than being brave. Sometimes protecting what you had seemed smarter than risking it for others. Sometimes the math of survival really did demand calculations that left people out. But sometimes, maybe just often enough, you could choose differently, could let principle cost you something, could let unity mean more than safety, could light a candle and mean it. From the living room, Grandma Letty's laugh rang out at something Angela said, the sound rich and free, unburdened by decades of carried regret. Angela's laughter joined hers, different but harmonizing, 2 parts of the same song finding each other again. Maya thought about the note she'd found, the confession that had waited to be discovered, how secrets stay silent until someone's brave enough to speak them, how principles stay comfortable until someone's willing to pay their price, how family stays abstract until someone does the hard work of making it real. She went back to the living room, squeezed onto the couch between her mother and Zara. The apartment was too small for this many people, too warm with the heat cranked up and bodies pressed close. It was perfect. "Tell me about my mother," Angela was saying to Letty. "Everything. Start from the beginning. I want to know where I come from." And Letty did. She spoke of Diane as a girl running through Alabama summers, too smart for the school that didn't know what to do with her. Of Diane at 18, moving north with dreams bigger than Birmingham allowed. Of sisters sharing an apartment, sharing clothes, sharing the adventure of Chicago in the 60s when everything seemed possible and nothing was guaranteed. Of choices made, bridges burned, silence that hardened into walls. And finally, of the slow journey back, not to erase what happened, but to acknowledge it, to sit with regret without drowning in it, to build something new from the pieces of what broke. Zara listened, absorbing the story that would become part of her foundation. She would remember this, the year Kwanzaa meant something, the year family expanded, the year principles stopped being abstractions and became actions. As the evening deepened and the city hummed its winter song outside, Maya realized that this was the real lesson of Umoja, not the easy unity of people who already agree, who already fit comfortably together, but the hard unity of making space, of risking comfort for connection, of choosing courage over the math of survival. The black candle in the Kinara had burned down to a nub, its flame steady despite being nearly expent, like Grandma Letty herself, diminished by time but burning brighter than ever, finally freed from the weight of unspoken truth. That night, after Angela and her family left with promises to return soon, with phone numbers exchanged and plans made, Maya helped Grandma Letty get ready for bed. The apartment felt emptier and fuller, fewer bodies present, but more space occupied by possibility. "Thank you," Letty said, as Maya helped her into her nightgown, the fabric soft from countless washings. "For finding that note, for making me face it." "You would have faced it eventually," Maya said. Maybe. Or maybe I would have died with it still secret. Easier that way. Safer. But not better. No, Letty agreed. Not better. She settled into bed, the mattress creaking under weight it had held for decades. When I'm gone, she said, keep them together. Angela, her kids, all of you. Don't let silence win again. Don't let fear be louder than love. I won't, Maya promised. We won't. She turned off the light, leaving just the streetlight glow filtering through the curtains. At the door, she paused, looking back at her grandmother, small under the covers, brave in ways that mattered more than grand gestures, imperfect and striving, and finally free. Grandma, do you think Diane would forgive you if she could? Letty was quiet for a long moment. Then, I think she'd understand, and maybe that's more important than forgiveness. Understanding that we're all just scared people trying to survive, sometimes succeeding at staying alive, but failing at truly living. And now? Now I'm living. Finally, at 87, I'm finally brave enough to live. Maya closed the door softly, walked through the quiet apartment. She stopped at the coffee table, looked at the Canara with its burned-down candles, the physical residue of principles practiced. Next to it sat the note, no longer hidden. Letty had decided to keep it visible, a reminder that honesty matters more than comfort, that the story we tell about ourselves needs to include the parts that hurt. Outside, Chicago slept its restless sleep, full of people making choices that would ripple through decades, building bridges or walls, choosing connection or safety, never knowing which would matter more in the end. Maya thought about Jasmine in her guest room, finally sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, about Angela 3 hours away in Detroit, maybe lying awake processing this new reality of family found, about Zara asleep down the hall, absorbing lessons that would shape how she moved through the world, about the ways we save each other by being brave enough to be human, flawed and
About the ways we save each other by being brave enough to be human, flawed and frightened, and still choosing moment by moment connection over comfort. The radiator clanked its familiar rhythm. The city hummed, and somewhere in the space between what was and what could be, family knit itself together again, one difficult choice at a time. The candle that wouldn't light, the truth that stayed hidden, had finally been struck, and its flame, though long delayed, burned bright enough to illuminate the way forward. Not perfect, not painless, but finally, after 43 years, honest. And in the end, maybe that's what umoja really means, not the easy unity of agreement, but the hard unity of showing up, of making space, of being brave enough to let love cost you something, of lighting the candle, finally, and meaning every word.